Hello and welcome to the Established Self-Love Summit. I'm your host, Tricia Reid. The Established Self-Love Summit is an open dialogue presenting ideas on the exploration of and nurturing of self-love and all the ways we could be blocking the love we so inherently crave. I look forward to exploring this further with you. Today, our guest is Dr. Michael Breus.
Hi, we are here for the Established Self-Love Summit, and today we have with us Dr. Michael Breus. Hi, can you?
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
All right, so Dr. Breus is an expert in sleep, and we're going to have him tell us the importance of sleep and how that will help us in our journey with establishing our own self-love. Take it away.
Absolutely. No, I'm happy to do it. So thank you, first of all, for having me at your summit. And I love the concept of self-love. I really like that idea. I don't think enough people have that as a concept in their own lives. And so the big question that I'm sure a lot of people are kind of wondering about is like, well, what does sleep have to do with something like that? Why am I listening to a sleep expert? So I'm here to tell you. So here's the good news is sleep affects every organ system and every disease state. Literally everything you do better with a good night's sleep. So let's talk through that as a concept for just a second. When you think about sleep overall, it doesn't just affect you physiologically, although it does. We know that lack of sleep, or what we call sleep deprivation, can actually reduce reaction time by almost a third. So as an example, if you get 1 hour less sleep a night for 5 nights in a row, your reaction time will lower so much that you're almost legally drunk driving a vehicle, just to give you an idea from the physiology side of things, right? Now, more specific to women, when you look at women and they become more sleep deprived, it throws all of their hormones off balance dramatically. So when you start to look at menstrual cycles, you start to look at pregnancy, you start to look at menopause, all of the things that can go on throughout the life cycle of a female, all of them are dramatically affected by sleep deprivation. In fact, I have some female patients where we change their bedtimes. So that a week before their menstrual cycle, they have one bedtime. A week after their menstrual cycle, they have a second bedtime. Again, because of their sleep needs are going to change. So one of the things I want to present to the group is everybody's sleep need is personal, okay? And so 8 hours is a myth. So I'm not the guy who's going to sit here and say, oh my God, everybody's got to get 8 hours a night. So let's kind of unpack that idea just for a second, and then we'll continue on with what is sleep deprivation, because you can't figure out what sleep deprivation is until you know what sleep is, right? So when you think about sleep in general, it actually comes from two specific systems in the brain. One is sleep drive, the other is sleep rhythm. Okay, sleep drive is a lot like hunger, right? So I'm hungry. I eat something and that hunger begins to dissipate, right? That's what sleep does, right? Is you get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier, and then you have some sleep, and then it relaxes. That's called sleep drive. Sleep rhythm is very different. Sleep rhythm, on the other hand, is kind of like hunger too. You notice how you get hungry around breakfast time, around lunchtime, around dinner time. Same holds true with sleep. Most people have a tendency to get sleepy somewhere between 10 and 11 o'clock at night. So when your drive is high and your rhythm is in sync, you sleep. But if either one of these is off, that's when you have one of two different categories. You can have a sleep disorder. Now, what is a sleep disorder? Sleep disorder is something like apnea, narcolepsy, restless leg syndrome, formal insomnia. But I believe that there's also a whole nother category that 99% of doctors don't talk about, and that's called disordered sleep, right? So disordered sleep is, I went to that room in the back of the house, I turned off the light, I was in there for 5, 6, 7 hours, I came out, I still feel like crap. What's going on? That's disordered sleep. And that's the universe that I play in quite a bit. And that is sleep deprivation. 9 times out of 10, you're not getting either the quality or the quantity of sleep that your body needs. Now, we've talked about the physiology behind that. Let's also talk a little bit about the psychology behind that. We know that cognition, or your ability to think clearly, directly affected by sleep. In fact, REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement sleep, is the phase of sleep where you move information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. So if you're trying to make a decision, you have to retrieve a piece of information. If you ain't got no REM sleep, you're not doing a good job of this, right? To be fair, one of the first things I ask my patients when they walk through the door is I say, hey, do you ever forget your keys? Or do you walk into a room and forget why you're there, or just at the store and you can't remember the list? That's REM sleep deprivation affecting your memory. So that's another area that sleep deprivation can have a pretty big effect on, is your memory. But then what about emotions, right? I mean, my daughter has explained it perfectly. If I don't have enough sleep, she says, Dad, you're a grumpy fish, right? That says it all, right? I mean, could there be a better diagnostic category than grumpy fish? Like, I don't think so.
Good visual.
Right? It's perfect. But we all know that feeling, right? Of when we're sleep deprived and we're like, ugh, you know, like we don't want to deal, we're overstressed, we're like, well, this isn't fun, you know, and what happens is we have more depression, we have more anxiety. And if you're, you know, dealing with any mental health issues, sleep deprivation makes every single one of them worse. Every one of them. There's not an instance where depriving yourself of sleep is a great idea from a mental health perspective. And let's talk about that for just a second. Like, what is sleep? Sleep is healing, right? So if you're talking self-love, there's no better self-love than taking a nap, right? Or getting the rest that you need, right? Like, it is truly healing. It is healing across every plane. You know, we've talked about physiology, we talked about cognition, we talked about psychology. Let's talk about spirituality too, right? You can't be a spiritual person. You can't connect with the energy. You can't be part of a community if you're exhausted. It just doesn't work very well, right? And so when we look at sleep and we look at the importance of sleep, I think the easiest way is to look at what sleep deprivation does to us in all four of these areas. And I would argue that that is really where the magic happens. That's the reason why we want to sleep, you know, and also we sleep to wake. Like, I haven't met anybody in my career who's like, I just love sleep. That's all I want to do is sleep, sleep, sleep. No, when you ask them, they say, I love sleep. Some of them hate it. And then some of them will just be like, you know, I sleep to wake. Like, I sleep, there's a purpose for my sleep. My purpose for sleep is to be able to spend time with my family, spend time with my friends, to have new hobbies, to get involved with my community, all the things that we do when we're awake. You know, sometimes people are like, Michael, you shouldn't be a sleep doctor, you should be a wake doctor, right? You know, because you're trying to influence what's going on.
Thought of it that way, because I do sleep to wake. When I wake up in the morning, I go through my ritual. I'm like, oh, I'm so happy to
Right.
be waking up to get to do all these things.
Exactly.
Thought of it that way. Like, yeah.
But I mean, if we're talking self-love, this is it, right? Because lots and lots of things happen during sleep. So we know that physical repair occurs. So in stages 3 and 4, which is what we call deep sleep, this is the physical restoration that we know that occurs. In REM sleep, like I was talking about earlier with memory, several other functions occur, and we call that our mentally restorative sleep, right? And so if we can get the right stages in the right amounts, we're actually pretty good. Now, a lot of people will say, well, how do I know? I mean, how much sleep should I get? What should I do? So I'm going to teach everybody a simple experiment, okay? So there's a couple of different statistics that you need to know. So the average sleep cycle is 90 minutes long, okay? So I want you to lock that into your hard drive, okay? Then the average person has 5 of those cycles. That's the other number to lock into your hard drive. So 5 times 90 is 450 minutes, right, of sleep. Divided by 60 per hour is 7.5 hours. So first of all, the math doesn't even work for 8 hours, right? I mean, that's the average sleep cycle. That's the average number of cycles, and it's not even coming close. So number one, again, 8 hours is a myth. Take that 7.5 and let's play around with it. So most people have a socially determined wake-up time. So in my house, my dogs start waking up somewhere between 6 and 6:15, right? And they sleep in our bed. We can talk about pets in the bed too. And they start, you know, moving people around and getting ready to get up. And so that's my socially determined wake-up time. We'll make the math simple and we'll say that it happens at 6:30, okay? So I take my socially determined wake-up time of 6:30 and I subtract 7.5 hours. Because remember, that's 5 cycles, 90-minute cycles, which puts my bedtime at 11 o'clock. When was the last time somebody told you when to go to bed? What were you, like 8? You right? 10 years old, something like that? So here I am, I'm the sleep doctor. Tricia and I are going to tell you what time to go to bed, okay? Is check out this experiment, because here's what's interesting. So by the way, I tried this experiment and it failed miserably. Let me tell you what happened. So I went to bed at 11 and I woke up at 5:30, okay? Went to bed at 11 the second night.
Before that, though?
Before that, I was going to bed at around 10.
Okay.
Around 10. So I stayed up an extra hour and I woke up at 5:30.
Okay.
No, I wasn't. You're wrong. That's a great question. I was going to bed at midnight and I went to bed an hour early. That's exactly right. And that's what happened.
Kind
right?
of Okay, go ahead.
Yep. No, you're actually the first person to ever ask me that. That's a great question. So I was going to bed at midnight. I went to bed at 11, woke up at 5:30. I was like, this sucks. Did it again. Went to bed at 11, woke up at 5:30. To be clear, I am not a morning person. The only thing I hate more than mornings are morning people. They're just so damn chipper all the time. Like, it's just not my thing. So I didn't want to be up at 5:30. So I scooched my bedtime later to midnight, and bam, I was waking up at 6:30 without an alarm, which is the interesting part. And that's the key, is you have to play around. You have to move your bedtime. The wake up time is pretty consistent. So for me, 6:30 as a marker wake up time, as a boundary, works out really, really well. And by the way, you got to do it on the weekends too. Like, I'm sorry, I know that sucks, but I don't care. That's what you got to do, because that whole rhythm, that circadian rhythm that we were talking about before, if you wake up, only the wake up time seems to do it, by the way, but if you wake up at the exact same time every day, roughly within 5 or 10 minutes, your body knows when it's going to wake up. And so then it historically understands where to layer in the sleep schedule and how to do that. And it compacts it. And all of a sudden you actually need less sleep. Like, when I started the experiments long ago, I was sleeping 7.5 hours a night, but just through that level of consistency, my sleep schedule just shrunk. And now, like I said, I get somewhere between 6:15 and 6.5 hours of sleep a night. And I'm the sleep doctor, for God's sakes, right? I mean, come on, right?
What else are you doing, though, to help support you in your quality of sleep?
Right. So that's the whole second section, right? And that's what else I work with patients on. So I'm a high performance sleep coach. So I have 3 to 5 clients at a time. I never have more than that. And I focus dramatically on exactly what's going on with them. And we increase their overall performance by helping them through better sleep. And so what other things that I do with them? It's a great question. So first of all, I have to determine what something is called their chronotype. So you may have heard you may not have heard the concept, but you've probably heard of the idea. A chronotype is also the same thing as somebody being called an early bird or a night owl, right? But it turns out there aren't 2, there's 4. And my contribution to the literature was I found the 4th one. So there's early bird, in the middle, night owl, and I added insomniac. And the reason I did is because these are all genetically predetermined. So if I looked at your 23andMe data or your Ancestry.com data, I could actually tell you which chronotype you were out of these 4, which is actually pretty fascinating when you start to think about it, because it's genetically predetermined. So then what I do is, not only are you figuring out the amount of sleep that you need, but when you should go to bed, right? So as an example, if you're an early bird, or what I call a lion, 5 a.m. might be your wake up time. So that means that you should go back to, what would that be, 9:30, and start going to bed there, right? But if you're a wolf like me or a night owl, you don't go to bed until midnight, right? And so there's a huge disparity there. But the fact of the matter is once you figure out the amount of sleep you need and when you need it, that amount begins to shrink even more. And again, you're just getting super duper efficient sleep. So I have a sleep tracker on my finger. Yep, there you go. And so I can track my sleep. And what I've discovered is, over the course of time, the more consistent I am sleeping at my chronotypical time, my deep sleep is up, my REM sleep is up, the light sleep is down, and I wake up feeling, like this, like I haven't had any coffee today. Nice. Right? And this is like my normal energy level. But let's talk about coffee for a second, because that's a big one for people, right? So when we think about caffeine, it's important to understand that caffeine actually has a half-life of between 6 and 8 hours, but that doesn't mean that 100% of it is out of your system in 16 hours, right? So that's a real misnomer. So people think, well, if the half-life is 8 hours, then it'll be completely out of my system in 16. No. Caffeine can actually linger in your system for up to 48 hours. Yeah, it's amazing.
Is it caffeine, or do we go deeper on like quality of coffee and the byproducts of that? Like, so
I'm merely talking about caffeine as a substance. Okay. Because if we get into the weeds on that, we could be at this for weeks.
That's a different conversation.
It's a whole different conversation. Okay. Exactly. But for caffeine in particular, here's my recommendation: is number 1, don't drink it in the morning. What are you talking about, Michael? How can that possibly be? Here's the deal. In order to exit a state of unconsciousness, you need 2 hormones. You need cortisol and adrenaline, and they both have to be pretty high. If you compare how powerful cortisol and adrenaline are to coffee, that's like comparing cocaine to weak tea. Okay, like there's no comparison to make, right? But if you just wait 90 minutes after you wake up, your cortisol and your adrenaline begin to drop. When you add caffeine, it actually lifts the cortisol and the adrenaline. You get more bang for your buck.
I love that point. Okay, didn't know this.
So it's a total biohack, right?
Okay.
So when you wake up in the morning, what should you do? You should be thirsty. Why? Sleep in and of itself is a dehydrative event. Most people don't know that. Just the humidity in your breath, breathing out over the course of time, you can lose up to 1 liter of water a night. Yeah.
Wow.
Right. This is one of the reasons why you shouldn't drink alcohol before bed, but we're going to talk about alcohol next.
There's more there. Yeah.
Right. So when you wake up in the morning, you're dehydrated. You should be drinking a bottle of room temperature water, right? Because you need to rehydrate. Because if you add caffeine to that, you're adding a diuretic to a dehydrated state. All you're going to do is fuck things up, right? I mean, your whole hydration just dumps, and then your body doesn't function the way it needs to. There's a reason your body's 90-something% water, right? It needs it. So waking up in the morning to drink coffee is never a good idea. Hydration, excellent idea. The other thing that you should do is get sunlight. Specifically, get 15 minutes.
Temperature water. Hold on.
Yes.
Tell them why room temperature water.
Oh, so room temperature water, there's 2 reasons why. Number 1 is because you don't forget it by putting it there the night before. But number 2 is there's not as much of a shock to your system. So it's actually better for you to drink. Generally speaking, it's better for you to drink room temperature water. I know, I get it. When it's hot out and it's summertime, you like something that's cool or cold. I'm the same way. But the more room temperature water you can drink, especially in the morning, it actually absorbs better. So you don't get that vasoconstriction, and that's part of the reason that it doesn't absorb as well.
Okay.
Okay. So then you want to get sunlight. Walk over to the window, walk outside, do something, but get direct sunlight. You don't have to stare at the sun, but what happens is the light in the sun has in the spectrum of light has blue light, which is 460 to 480 nanometers. When that hits your eyeball, there's a special cells in your eye called melanopsin cells, and these turn off the melatonin faucet in your brain. Right? This is the reason why we have brain fog in the morning, is because our melatonin is still going, because people don't have consistent wake-up times. See, you can see where I'm headed here, right? Is if you can keep this consistency in wake-up times, sleep at the right time, hydrate at the right time, and get sunlight, by the way, none of that costs you a dime to do, and your entire sleep schedule starts to get better, right? Your entire sleep schedule starts to get better. Then you can have your first cup of coffee. So you've had your water, you've had your 15 minutes of sunlight, you're feeling pretty good. By the way, you may not need a cup of coffee at that point. Right. I personally like to go outside, and this, I have no data to support this, but I do this most mornings, is I take off my shoes and I put my feet on the earth. I have no data as to why that's effective. I've looked up earthing. I'm not comfortable saying that it has a huge scientific effect. I am, however, comfortable saying I like it. I don't know why I like it, but I like my feet on the ground, and I scrunch up my toes, and it feels good. And my dogs don't seem to mind because they're out there with me in the morning as well. Yeah. So it's just kind of a nice little ritualistic way for me to start my day. Now let's talk about the back end of sleep, and let's talk about alcohol, because that really is a big one. And especially during times like now, we have to be very careful with alcohol consumption. So alcohol in and of itself is the #1 sleep aid in the world. More people use alcohol to help them fall asleep than anything else. To be clear, there's a really big difference between going to sleep and passing out, okay? We don't like passing out. There's multiple reasons why we don't like passing out. The biggest one is it's not good sleep. It's not real sleep. It's being unconscious. There's a difference. And also, alcohol completely obliterates stage 3, 4 sleep, that wake up and feel great sleep that I was telling you about before. That physical restoration flies out the window with alcohol, which is, by the way, half the reason why you have a hangover. So that's something you clearly want to be able to avoid. So, but here's the thing. I like red wine. I like scotch. I don't think there's anything wrong with either one of those. Right. So let's talk about how do we manage this process. It's actually quite simple. So if you have 1 alcoholic beverage, drink 1 glass of water, because it's also a diuretic, and wait 1 hour before bed. 2 glasses of alcohol, 2 glasses of water, 2 hours before bed. Once you kind of hit the 3-glass mark, some different things can happen, okay? So #1, most people don't understand this, but alcohol, once you reach over 2 glasses, with women, it actually gives them an energetic effect, not a depressive effect. With men, it does the same thing. It gives them an energetic effect. However, men can also turn aggressive. So again, this is not the time in which you want to be doing this. However, if you're sitting in a quarantine situation, right, and you've got a couple of great bottles of wine in the pantry, and you're thinking, hey, it's Friday night, it's party time, right? Do yourself a favor, have 1 glass. of that grape bottle, maybe 2. And then if you can, give yourself the water, give yourself the time, because I promise you the next day you will feel like crap if you drink too much wine before bed. It's just a fact of it. Now, for people who want to get even more specific, there's at least one study to show that dark liquors have more of an effect than light ones do. So your tequilas and gins and vodkas are going to give you less of that sleep issue than your bourbons and your scotches and things like that. Same with red wine versus white wine, we think. Again, it's not like anybody's really done a great job of studying this, but there's some anecdotal data, and there's at least 1 or 2 studies to show that. So when you're thinking about alcohol before bed, and you think about caffeine before bed, these are all the different things that you need to start considering. So what I did was I put all of these tips into an easy to remember 5-step plan. So I'm gonna give it to everybody right now. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So step number 1 is to stick to 1 wake-up time. I don't care what it is. We talked about different ways that you can figure out what time you want to wake up, but it's got to be 1 during the week and the weekends. Step number 2, stop caffeine by 2 p.m. Right? Why stop caffeine by 2? Because it gives you enough half-life to hopefully be able to fall asleep. Step number 3 is to stop alcohol 3 hours before bed. That's assuming that you have 2 to 3 drinks and that's where you stop, okay? Step number 4 is to exercise every single day, but don't exercise within 4 hours of bedtime. Let's talk about that for a second. Exercise is the easiest way to improve the overall quality of your sleep, but you don't have to run a marathon, okay? 20 minutes of cardio every day is fantastic. And especially during times like now where there's a lot of quarantine, where people are quarantined and staying at home. Here's the big issue. Nobody's moving, right? You go from Zoom call to Zoom call to Zoom call, right? And so what I'm telling people to do is in between, your meetings, walk outside and get some fresh air. Do 5 jumping jacks. Just literally walk around your block. It was funny. I saw a celebrity was tweeting last night that it was noon and they had taken a grand total of 200 steps. 200 steps. They had been up since 7 o'clock in the morning. They've been up for 5 hours and they'd taken 200 steps, right?
Count mine today. I've had so many calls.
Right. But that's the problem, is we're stuck, right? Is we're here and we're stuck and, that kind of thing. And so movement is important. By the way, that lack of general movement also affects your ability to fall asleep. And being under times of bigger stress like we are now, there's a lot of uncertainty, what's going on, that actually elevates our fatigue as well. So we really have to be like self-love, self-care, now's the time, right? And so that's what we really need to be focusing in on. And so again, those 5 steps have a tendency to work really well. The 5th one, by the way, is to wake up every morning, give the sun a high five, and get 15 minutes of sunlight. So remember, step number 1, stick to 1 wake-up time. Step number 2, stop caffeine by 2 p.m. Step number 3, stop alcohol 3 hours before bed. Step 4, stop exercise 4 hours before bed. And step number 5 is to give the sun a high five in the morning. If you just do those 5 things, you're good to go.
Love it. I love it. Okay, so let's talk about, you were going to talk about food and then why the alcohol. Well, you said the 3-hour thing. So it seemed to me after a glass of wine or 2, it seemed like I would wake up about 5 hours later. What is that?
So what's going on there? So what happens in that case is you fell asleep too quickly after you had the wine, okay? And so the wine made you feel sleepy, and then your natural sleep deprivation took over and made you fall asleep. Here's what ends up happening is you burn through the sugars in the wine. My guess, it was probably red because they have bigger sugars and bigger tannins. And it seems to be about 4 or 5 hours afterwards that people their sleep gets very light because number 1, you got to pee, right? Because you've inserted a volume of liquid. So your body is going to want to, get rid of that. But also your brain doesn't really know what happened. I mean, you intoxicated your brain to the point of basically, I mean, not you personally, but you know what I'm saying, is drinking alcohol intoxicates your brain to this point where it basically goes unconscious. Again, there's a very big difference between passing out and going to sleep. And so what happens with a lot of people is they fall asleep under this influence of alcohol. Their brain doesn't really know that state because it doesn't recognize it necessarily as sleep. And then the alcohol wears off and then you naturally wake up and your brain's like, what happened? Where did those last 5 hours go? And then you're up and you've got all this autonomic arousal and you're up and around.
Yeah. So what can people do with that if that is, the series of events that lead them to, hey, okay, so.
Right. So if that's what's going on, start playing around with the alcohol, right? Start limiting alcohol. Because like I've got one patient And like, we're trying a different alcohol each night to see how it affects his sleep, because he likes to eat, like, he's in the business. He has a company that makes alcohol. He has to drink literally for his job on a regular basis. And so he's trying to discover, like, does tequila work for me? Does white wine work better for me? When can I have it? And so it's really an experiment that you have to run on yourself. But the good news here is that, I mean, alcohol is not a requirement for sleep. You can sleep without alcohol. And oftentimes I'm recommending it for people. Enjoy your adult beverage earlier in the evening. Set up your bedtime for it so that's the right time for you, and schedule it out. You'll be surprised. It works out pretty well.
Okay, so then let's talk about food and sleep. Let's go there.
So when we talk about food and sleep, obviously we're thinking about things like caffeine and sugar, right? So we've already talked quite a bit about caffeine. Obviously avoid caffeinated foods if you can before bed. To be clear, there's almost not enough caffeine in chocolate for you to have to worry about. My wife told me a long time ago that if I ever told people that they could not have chocolate, that she would divorce me on the spot. She eats chocolate every single day. So I said, okay, let's figure out a workaround on this. So I actually started to look into the caffeine concentration, and in dark chocolate, it's actually much less than you would imagine. And it's just not enough caffeine to really make a difference for most people. To be fair, people have different caffeine sensitivities. And so I have one patient, if she eats 2 Hershey's Kisses, she's up all night. I got another one who can eat a 3-pound Hershey bar and go right to bed. So I know it's ridiculous. Not a 3-pound bar. I'm exaggerating there. Right. Anybody eats 3 pounds of chocolate, you're going to puke, right? So, I mean, no matter how good it is. So, there's different sensitivities there. So aside from chocolate, sugar is really the big thing that people need to start thinking about. I wrote an entire blog, and we can refer to that in the show notes or in the summit notes if you'd like, that looks all at that topic in particular, which is how does sugar affect your sleep. But to be fair, it just mucks it up. I mean, I wish sugar wasn't the evil that it has turned out to be, because I love it. I am an ice cream person. I could eat ice cream every single night if I was allowed to do so. Now I'm finding these unique ice cream flavors. Like, I'm finding like ice creams that are non-dairy and non-sugar, like made from bananas and soy and oat milk. And I mean, there's some cool stuff out there.
Good options coming up. I am to say.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. They're expensive though. It's like $9 a pint.
It is, but it's worth it, because I think that the reaction after and the higher quality ingredients and what my mental emotional state, and I won't have the guilt. You know what I mean? It's all layers.
Well, for me, I don't have the diarrhea, because that's what happens, right? Because I mean, look, I'm an open book, right? So like, when I eat ice cream, I eat a pint. Like, that's the minimum I'm going to eat, right? That's just how I am. And so when you put that much dairy into your system on a regular basis, it isn't going to be that great for you probably. So finding some of those things can be helpful as well. And that kind of brings up the whole idea or topic of what can you eat before bed or what shouldn't you eat before bed. So let's talk about that for a brief and shining moment. So here's what I can tell you is you don't want to go to bed hungry, because the hunger is going to keep you awake, but you also don't want to go to bed full. Because the body really wasn't meant to digest food either lying down or sitting down, or sitting rather. So what I would argue is what you probably want to do is look at about a 250 calorie snack about 30 minutes before bed, and don't go crazy. And believe it or not, this is going to sound different. Most people you won't hear this. You want it to be about 75% carbohydrates and about 25% protein. So like, what are you talking about, Michael? Why would you do that? The influx of carbs, again, at the 250 calorie mark, I'm not saying eat a 12 donuts. I'm saying, good, solid, healthy carbohydrates, like apple and nut butter would be a perfect example of something that you could do, or like rice cakes with some almond butter on them or something like that would be something that you could do to kind of get that little sweetness that you want.
In there too. Like, I'm hearing the fat.
Oh, the fat's fantastic for you. Absolutely. Well, and the fat is really what you want. And that's what kind of on the protein side of it. But believe it or not, carbohydrates increase serotonin. And serotonin is the calming hormone, right? That's why we call them comfort foods.
Yes.
Right? Because when we eat the starchy potatoes and the French fries and all, it feels good. You know why it feels good? Because our brain produces serotonin from it. But so if we have healthy carbs, again, at the 250 calorie mark before bed, along with some good fat, oh, there's nothing better. You'll fall asleep well. And you don't have an upset stomach from it. And it's actually good for your microbiome.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us about your book. Okay. Found your book. On the power of when.
Yep, the power of when. So the power of when is all about chronotypes, which is kind of what we alluded to a little bit earlier. And so when we talk about chronotypes, there are four. There's early, in the middle, night owls, and insomniacs. And so what my book does is it doesn't just look at sleep, because like we've been saying, we don't just sleep, we sleep to wake. And so what's interesting is those chronotypical patterns, they happen 24 hours a day. So if you're a night owl, that doesn't mean that you only want to sleep at, be up at night and sleep late. It means that your hormones are actually that way. Mm. So like my cortisol goes up at 8 o'clock at night, and I'm perfectly awake until midnight. Whereas there's a lot of people who are early birds where their cortisol pops at 4:30 in the morning. If my cortisol popped at 4:30 in the morning, that would be terrible, right? Because I don't like mornings. So what we're discovering is there's actually perfect times of day based on your chronotype to do certain things. And the science is incredible on this. We have over 200 studies linked in the book. I can tell people the best time of day to have sex, eat a cheeseburger, ask their boss for a raise, like literally you name it. And we figured out and again, it's just tracking your hormones throughout a 24-hour cycle and knowing when certain hormones are up and certain hormones are down.
So what about our vital organs and how they know how to function and do their thing at certain times of the day? Talk about
Right. So that's all about circadian rhythmicity, right? And so we have a central circadian pacemaker, which is in our brain called our suprachiasmatic nucleus, but we actually have over 300 circadian rhythms that are going on throughout our body. So the way I think about it, Trish, is kind of like this, is like, have you ever been to New York to Grand Central Station?
No, but I've been to Tokyo.
Okay, so you understand, right? So like these humongous railway stations where there's hundreds of trains coming in, well, there's a group of people that are organizing all of this, right? That's your circadian rhythm, right? And when one of those trains is late, or one of them is early, or one of them isn't following the routine, what happens? It's a freaking mess, right? So that's exactly what happens in your body. And so the more you can keep this circadian rhythmicity going, the better off your body actually functions, right? And so that's really the key factor behind the whole book. It's a fun book. I mean, I wrote it about 5 years ago. I'm working on a new one now, all about energy and sort of how to get it and how to keep it, which I think is vitally important. But it's all also based and steeped in the science of circadian rhythms. And so I really recommend to people, if they get an opportunity, you can figure out what your circadian rhythm is for free without actually buying the book. If you go to chronoquiz.com, or thepowerofwhenquiz.com. You can hop on there and you just type in your email. I send you the whole thing and you learn you get a lot of information, trust me.
Yeah. Okay, so I want you to tell us about why you got into doing this.
So it was completely by accident.
Accolades. You have so many accolades. Like come on, your bio says by age 31, you were one of the only 163. I mean,
so I'll tell you that story. It's a funny story. Okay. And so what you're talking about is I'm one of 168 psychologists in the world to have ever taken and passed the medical sleep specialty board without going to medical school. So,
wow.
Right. So that's what I did. So how did that come about? So here's the crazy part. So I had graduated from college and graduated from graduate school, got my PhD and had my first job in a sleep lab, which was what I wanted because I had done a sleep specialty in my residency. And I was in my first job and it was a job interview. And I turned to the guys and I was, doing my whole thing. And I said, if they just offer me $30,000, I can buy health insurance. Like that's where I was in my universe, right? Just to give everybody knows when they were at that point in time in their life, right? And so I walk in and I was like, and he was like, okay, here's the offer, Michael. We're going to give you $60,000. We're going to give you full benefits. We're going to give you 2 weeks vacation and 2 weeks medical vacation for you to go and learn about stuff. He said, but here's the only thing. At the end of 1 year, you have to take and pass the sleep medicine boards. And I raised my hand and I said, excuse me, Dr. DeMarini, he was my very first boss, still a dear friend. I said, I'm a PhD, not an MD, and that's a medical board. Yeah. And he said to me, Michael, there's a 2-year window left where non-MDs can take it. There aren't many people that pass it. So here's my deal to you. You're fired at the end of the year if you don't pass. Okay. And that's how it went down. And so I went home to my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And you know what I said? 60 grand. This is amazing. I had no intention of being able to pass the sleep medicine boards at all. I didn't think I was going to actually be able to do that. And so here's what I did is I saw 15 to 20 patients a day. I would read 10 to 15 sleep studies in the evening. And then I would go to the Emory Law Library because I was studying in Atlanta, Georgia. And there was a reading list. And I literally read every single book cover to cover. And I would read a paragraph and I would make a note card. And I would say, what question could be on the boards from this? And I'd put the question on the front, I put the answer on the back. And then before bed, I would flip cards. And I did this for an entire year. And at the end of the year, I had over 3,000 cards. And it would take me almost 4 hours to flip through all of them each night. And I went in and I took and I passed the boards. And that's how I became a sleep doctor.
That is such a high level of commitment. That is incredible.
Talk about self-love. Holy cow.
Yes. Wow. So I love your story. I love it so much. This has been amazing and I've learned so much. Is there anything else that you could share with others, not to be selfish, but is there anything else that...
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so here's what I would tell you is I feel like a really good job with my website. And there's a lot of blogs on there. I've written actually over 800 blogs looking at every question you could possibly imagine for sleep. If you swing on by, it's thesleepdoctor.com. Check it out. There's a lot of really great information on there. I answer questions like 3 reasons that you wake up in the middle of the night and what to do about them, or what are the foods for sleep, or what are 5 relaxation techniques that I can use before bed, or is there something to help me in the middle of the night, that kind of stuff. I also do a very detailed monograph on all of the sleep supplements that are out there. So if you're interested in melatonin or magnolia bark or valerian root, I look at it by ingredient and I give you all the science and it's all well referenced. So if you're looking for information, I feel confident to tell you that my site's going to give you some good stuff.
I am so excited we got to share this conversation. Thank you so much. This has been so informative. So it was really nice talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on board. Happy to talk with you and your tribe, and wishing everybody a lot of great self-love and sweet dreams.
Thank you.